All right, that sounds good. I think a lot of you all came here for apparently a math conference. Let's see here. But instead, I think a lot of you all, what we want to do here is go ahead and get started. Math Simulator, Marley Moose, I know some of you all signed up for that, but what we're really here for today is actually for Vet School of America, Farm 245. It's a practical lab, drugs and dosage. All right, now you all can probably see Marley right here, Marley Moose. This is his official name. A couple things about some of the animals that you all are going to be working with. Sometimes you have to do what's called remote vetting. Remote vetting means that when it's at a distance, okay? Remote means at a distance, and vetting means when you use your veterinarian sorts of skills to be able to help solve some problems here. Now, this happens to be Simba. This is Marley's predecessor. And one of the things that they happen to have in common, if you can sort of see this, is that they tend to like to chew into things, an awful lot of things. And that can be toys, that can be their bedding, it can be your favorite guitar, isn't that right, Marley? And one of the things that happens when they do that is it can cause some problems, and you might have to perform what's called an emergency surgery for something called an inguinal hernia. That's when things get trapped up. When you do this, a lot of times they're gonna have to do it in the house right then and there. They're not gonna have long to live, and so you're gonna have to make sure that you can save Marley Moose. Now, a couple of things about it. Before you get ready for your surgery, you wanna make sure that you actually don't cause any pain for the animal. And so we use something that's called medetomidine. The actual sort of generic version of that is Domitor. Everybody can say that aloud if you want to. 1, 2, 3, Domitor. It's even sometimes more fun to say medetomidine. But either way, you want to make sure that you put the animal out. Now, you can imagine a couple of things. If you give it too little, then of course it's going to be feeling the pain of the surgery. And if you give it too much, then, well, quite honestly, it kills the animal. So a couple of things I'd like for you to think about it. Go ahead and you'll be using your chat box. And I'd like for you to just go ahead and plug in the things that you think you might need to know to be able to determine how much Domitor or medetomidine that you need to use. What are the things you need to know? A lot of answers here, things that you need to know. Some people are thinking the weight of the animal, that might be important. Some other people are thinking, we've got a couple that think dosage. And then Kara, could you just read out aloud a couple of the things that people are writing into their chat?
The metabolism of the animal, weight, age, overall health, where to inject it, species,
that's important.
Empty stomach, overall health of the dog, allergies.
Great. Those are all wonderful sorts of things to be able to consider and think about. The two main things that we try to think about initially when we're there is the weight of the animal. That's the number one thing that we have. And then the second thing that we have is that we want to also think about what the dosage is. Now we're given the dosage, and this is the real dosage for Domitor that we work with. And as you can see, I'm going to let you work with those units of measure. There's something interesting about it. They don't really go with pounds like we do here in the United States, and that's something that comes from the veterinarian field. Start to get used to that. But what I want you all to do is I want you to start to think about the dosage and then the weight of the animal. And a lot of times you don't even have a scale. It's an on-the-spot sort of thing, and you've got to be able to make sure that you can do surgery or perform surgery for that animal. So we're going to be using an estimate. There's a beautiful picture of Marley Moose. And a couple of things. I'm going to be sending you to breakout rooms in just a minute. When we do those breakout rooms, I'd like for you to think about some things. Number one is that if you feel comfortable, go ahead and turn on your video. And I want you to pause for a minute. Even if you don't turn on the video, you do have a chance to say hi to other people. It is a conference. It's a nice thing to do if you feel comfortable with that, even if it's only for a second. Second thing I want you to do is one person. I want you to share your screen, and when you do, I want you to go to a specific URL. That URL is HTTPS. That's a secure connection. When we do veterinarian school, we make sure that it's a secure connection because we want to make sure that we're following all the laws that are out there. Secure connection, https://marley.midschoolmath.com. https://marley.midschoolmath.com. And that one person together, you all are going to come up and come into a chat together and make sure that you submit your answer as a group. You will only get one answer. Let's go through those instructions for a second again. Say hi. It's a conference. The second thing is one person is going to share their screen out of the group. They'll be broken into groups of 5 or 6. Carol will be doing that in just a minute. You'll be going to the URL, https, secure connection, //marley.midschoolmath.com, and then you'll be submitting your answer as a group. Are there any questions, Kara, from the team that we ought to have before we get going?
I don't see any. I also added that link inside the chat, but this chat right now that you see where it has it, you may want to copy that link right now and have it already, because when you go into your magic breakout rooms, that you won't see this chat, you'll see your breakout room chat.
Excellent. You'll be typing in the simulation code Marley. It should already be set up. If you do need the code, it is Marley. And on the count of 5, we will go into our breakout rooms and try this for the first time.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Good luck.
Okay, it looks like we have about 20 people who are still in this room. Some of the reasons you might be in this room still are if you decided to leave your own meeting, in which case you can reach out to me, but basically about being put into a different room, or it could be sometimes if you're using a Chromebook or some types of computers, the breakout rooms don't always function as you would want. But I'm going to, Scott, there's someone in breakout room 34 asking for help.
Okay, Kara, how do I go to that?
So if you click on the breakout rooms thing on your co-host thing, you should be able to see a little pop out that says breakout rooms in progress.
It says breakout room. It says I'm assigned to group number, breakout room 2.
Yeah, but you should be able to scroll in that box to go to breakout room 34 and then join that one.
I do not have that option.
Huh. Okay. Do you see a breakout rooms in progress little pop-up?
It just says that I'm assigned to breakout room number 2.
Huh. Let me make sure that you're a host or co-host. Okay, there's also someone in breakout room 1 asking for help. Yeah. Okay, so someone is here in the large room because they're not able to, for the breakout sessions. Okay, perfect. Okay. Huh, it's kind of interesting. So Scott, if I make you the host right now,
okay.
Can you make sure to make me a co-host before you go into the breakout room?
I should be able to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to make you the host.
Kara, to find you as a
participant. I think. Are you still able? You're still able to hear me, which is good.
Make co-host. Okay.
Okay, good. So now when you go to breakout rooms, do you see the whole thing?
I do.
Okay.
And then now you said to go to breakout room number.
I I think it was 34 that was asking for help and also 1. So you can check in with those folks.
Okay.
And then let me know how much longer you want before bringing everybody back. Okay. Great. I see someone asking to put them in a room, so I'm going to see if I can do that. Although I just shared the. Okay, I'm gonna have to see. Oh, okay. I am gonna. I just had to share that ability because for some reason Scott didn't have the ability to visit the rooms that he was looking for. So for those of you who are here, what I may do is we'll just sort of use this a little bit as a breakout room. Because I'm not able to add people right now because I think I gave that to Scott. This is the disadvantage of trying to do this with, you know, we've got sort of 300 participants right now, so there's way more of these than if you were to do this in your own classroom, for example. Okay, so let me share my screen, and I'm going to go to here. Okay.
All right, so Kara,
Uh-huh.
back. I am going to, if I can, may I share? I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay, so I'm going to stop my share. I was going to try and go to the simulator for people who are left behind. There were several people who wanted to, to get back. But I think if we bring everyone back in and then I can work, if you make me host again, then what I can do is try to arrange for all those people who didn't make a breakout room this time, I'll make sure that they get in one or try to do my best to make sure they get in one next time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
You are now the host.
Okay, and then I'm going to make sure that you are a co-host.
And then I am a, yep.
Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to close all the rooms and bring everyone back. Does that make sense?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Kara, if you'll let me know when people are back.
They'll be coming back in like 45 seconds, but people will sort of be coming. Some people are going to end up leaving their rooms early. So we're up to like 80 people in this room right now.
Hi, I am wondering if anyone knew the code. We weren't able to do the simulator.
Oh, it was supposed to automatically put it in. Marley was the code, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right, maybe I'll go try to do it now. Thank you.
These the online differences. So yes, you're welcome to do it now.
Okay.
Kara, let me know if you would when we're back and ready to go.
I think everyone should be back now. There may be a few people who are, yeah, everyone should be back now.
Great. All right. Now that we're back, I'm sharing my screen. These are the actual real responses from your teams, and the respondent's correct. A lot of you people out there actually happen, you guys are rookies. This is your first veterinarian school, experience that you've had in our farm lab here. And so as a bunch of rookies, sometimes you're going to make a mistake, but some of you actually did happen to kill my dog, either that or it's going to feel a lot of pain while it's in surgery. And actually this comes from some research that shows that one of the very top mistakes, the #1 cause of mistakes for having the wrong dosage from medicine happens to be handwriting from doctors, okay? Isn't that sort of a fun thing to know, that the handwriting, and they tend to either give the wrong dosage or they tend to give they actually give the wrong drug. So that's the number one cause. And that accounts for 40% of the mistakes that are made with the wrong dosage. But the second biggest mistake happens to be that we also tend to give the wrong dosage because we're not using the proper proportional reasoning for our things. Now, a lot of you all had nothing to work off of. You didn't have a scale for Marley. But Marley happens to be a 90-pound dog. 90-pound dog. And we know that seems to be like, wow, that's an awful lot. But Marley he's a big dog. And even though it looks like he's a little bit smaller there, he's kind of a giant beast. It's something for us to be thinking about. But this actually comes from the results that we would typically see when we go into this. And as us going through it for the first time, this is something that we get to calculate. The other part too is that when we translate the number that we got from an actual calculation to actually being able to draw on the syringe and then being able to provide that as an answer, it's a different type of answer than just giving the number itself. In fact, about 18% of the mistakes that get made when we have the wrong dosage occur when we actually translate the numbers to what actually is occurring. So it occurs during the administration process. As you all can see right here, we've had almost 50 respondents and we're still at about 18% correct. 24% are too high, and then those that were too low, most likely because of the fact that we underestimated the weight of the dog. We'll come back to it in just a minute here. I am going to share my screen to something else.
Hey, Scott, while you're typing that in, can we give that URL out for our classrooms? Can we use that this week?
You can, and we'll actually talk about some others. If you'd like to, you certainly could do that. I'll have to provide a couple of additional links. There's going to be an additional tool set that we'll be able to offer at the very end of this. So, a couple of things about it. We look at these sorts of simulations and we try to understand them. One of the things that we do at MidSchool Math is we study those in contrast to what we see with kind of the typical norm of teaching. That's when we give information, and then after that we provide a test or a quiz of it of some sort. We look at the normal effects of things. We see what's about 0.4 standard deviations of improvement or gain from a student under normal teaching conditions. When we look at simulations, they have one of the highest effect size on randomized controlled trials. We've done this now with over 1,100 students. And the effect size is enormous. It's a 1.24, which is in the top 1/10 of all, top 1/10 of 1% of all educational research. And the question is, why is it that simulations happen to work so much better than kind of the traditional norm of teaching? It's about 3 times what we see from the normal effect. And it has something to do with how we learn. What you see here before you is what's called a synapse. And that synapse is very, when they do sort of the beautiful pictures of them or the beautiful views of them, what it is just simply a gap in the brain. But as we learn something new, we actually build brand new synapses. We actually build these physical characteristics. And when we look at a neural network, what we notice about it is that we say, well, if we want to build in another synapse, the traditional methodology of teaching that we would normally use might be just fine. We might be learning here about proportional reasoning or proportional thinking. We say, well, when we see a neural network, we say, well, we could teach a concept. And then after we teach that concept, then we're going to have some repetition for it. And then after that, we're going to do more of the same. We're going to move on to that new concept. In other words, we're building a neural network out to that learning. The problem about that is that the traditional method of teaching, where we teach a concept that's not connected to a lot of other sorts of things, is that that's not what a neural network looks like inside the brain. We look at these neural networks in the brain. They're these very big, complex objects. And so as we go into them, what happens is that when we learn something, we don't just learn it in a way that's disconnected from other things. We think about the animal, we think about the emotions of the animal, we think about the emotions of the pet owners that are there with us. And so when we start to learn that proportional reasoning, we're not just going to do this and go ahead and say, well, we're going to perform surgery. We're going to actually do something where we're going to go in and think about all of those additional connections. And when we do that, all we have to have is a singular cue, and it lights up an entire region of the brain, allowing for us to access that piece of mathematics even better. When we see an image of a dog or Marley or whatever else it might be, it could be a picture of a friend who's had cancer, or it could be someone who we've known that might have even died from coronavirus, whatever it is, it triggers a set of memories for us. And so when we see this image, once we've done a simulation and we've done it in depth, it actually will trigger in the brain ratios and proportions. It'll trigger that sort of reasoning that occurs just from the image alone. And a couple of things about these simulations is that they cause much longer recall. I'll talk with students that have looked at one of these simulations, and 5 or 6 months later, they'll see a picture, and it'll trigger for them what the mathematics was. We're talking about from the beginning of the school year. And in part, they also have greater comprehension. Now, I'm going to dive you down into a different kind of a simulation, give you an opportunity to think about some things. So, and we'll take a look and see what that one is. As you watch this immersion video, you'll see that it relates to some of the things that are occurring in our current world.
The official death toll just reached 500, and they think this is going to help.
Absolutely preposterous. Avoid vegetables. These officials know everything about public opinion and nothing about disease. This is the worst outbreak of cholera in British history. Over 140 deaths in the first 72 hours, and now you say 500.
All of London is in terror. People are fleeing for their lives, leaving in droves.
I've knocked on hundreds of doors in Soho, trying to make sense of this epidemic, trying to find out who has died and where. Such conditions, Annabelle, such misery, such a horrible disease.
Why is it that the poor must so often be the ones to suffer?
It's criminal, I tell you. I'd like to see how some of these posh London bureaucrats would feel about vomiting to death.
I don't think you should go to Soho anymore. It's much too dangerous. You can contract it.
That's where I believe you're wrong. My studies shall not have been in vain. I believe I'm onto something. Now, current theory holds that cholera is spread through miasmatic air.
Yes, the glorious stench of London.
Well, I, for one, do not believe it is spread through bad air. Look at this map. I've made a small mark for each cholera death. Do you notice a pattern?
Not presently.
Neither did I at first. So I made these scatter plots using the same data. Now, what do you see?
I see dots. Many dots.
Look closer. I believe those dots may be telling us something very important.
All right, in a different breakout room, I'm going to actually send you out to a breakout room. And normally the task that we start off with in math is to say, well, what are the data showing? What's the answer to this? It's the building so-and-so high. What's the volume? We've given all this information first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to back it down a little bit. Dan Meyer talks about how we have the level of mathiness. And a lot of times we walk into our math classrooms and it's set at 12, right? Or 11, right? It's beyond even a 10. It's so mathy. And what happens is that we've walked into a room where the heat is so high and we're coming from a place that's not working in that way. We might have come from outdoors, and metaphorically, the temperature in the room is beyond what we would expect it to. So we're going to ask you to back it down to a 3, a 2, or a 3, or a 4. Go into your breakout rooms. Kara's going to set you up with that. And I'm going to ask you
So sorry, everybody. That was totally my fault. I pressed the room, the room thing a little early. So hopefully everyone is back with us now. We're gonna open up those same rooms again, but I'm gonna let Scott finish and telling you what to expect. My fault. Sorry, these things go wrong sometimes. So Scott, do you want to tell everyone what they should do once they get to that room again?
a
I'm gonna
minute.
unmute you. Yeah. Okay, Scott.
Yeah, just for a minute, what we'd like
Yeah.
you all to do is to take a minute and talk with each other about what you noticed from the story, what it is, and not so much on the math side of things. We're looking for you to actually just have a conversation about the things that that you've learned, and actually try to dig in. And it might be that it's a little bit confusing. You might not know something. Try to pull out from other people. What questions do you have? But only focus for a minute on what the story is of the video that you watched rather than the math part to it. And I hope that's clear enough, Kara, at this stage to go ahead and move forward.
Okay, sorry about that. So what everyone's going to do is have a conversation with their group, just so I understand about sort of what they noticed about the story, what they noticed about the video.
That's right.
Okay.
Just the story.
And again, if you have any problems in your group, leave the meeting. And I think I now know how to put people back into different breakout rooms, just so everyone knows this is a lot bigger than what it will be like if you do breakout rooms in your own, with your own students, which you won't have quite so many to manage. So thank you for bearing with us all. So I'm going to open up everyone's room now so you can all discuss what happened in that video. Yeah, Scott, so sorry that
Oh, that's
I
okay.
thought I was just creating the rooms, but instead it created them and sent everybody to them. I tried.
No, that's okay. We're totally good. When we come back,
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could facilitate the chat. And
Yeah.
what I'm going to do is ask people to enter into chat what they notice from the data, what they think is happening.
Okay.
So it'll just be as a whole group. I probably would only leave them in the breakouts for probably a grand total of, oh, I don't know, 2.5 minutes, maybe 3.
Okay.
Sure.
So someone just added in the chat. I'm going to look for your name to see if I can add you to a breakout room. It could be, so some of the things that happen in breakout, sometimes depending on the computer that you're using, I think some Chromebooks have a hard time getting into breakout rooms, but I'm going to try to assign you right now to a breakout room. So if you had the same problem that the one person who just entered in the chat had, go ahead, and I think I was able to successfully add her to a room. So I will be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so Scott, it seems like last time there were about 7 people that I wasn't able, because I had given you the host controls, I wasn't able to add them into the rooms when they requested it. But this time, hopefully, I'm able to do that. And then, are you able to join the different rooms?
I might be able to join them, but if I,
Yeah.
well, I actually have to become the
host again. That's interesting, because when we tried that yesterday, I wonder if it's just, this is a limitation when you just have too many of them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It just tells me to go to one, and so then I'd have to go to that one. And I think, Kara, whenever you're ready, we'll just bring everyone back.
Okay, closing all the rooms.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
And Kara, if you'll let me know.
Yeah, it says at about 43 seconds still. But do you see the list of participants grow?
It's tricky because of the.
But yeah, when you're sharing your screen and hosting, it's it's a lot. But people are slowly trickling back in. We're at about 50, 57 now, and in about 20 more seconds, everyone else should be with us.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and everybody should be on their way back now, Scott.
All right. A lot of you all had a conversation about just what the story was, and a lot of people think, oh no, we shouldn't do that in math class. We've got to get to the actual information first, and that we've got to be focused on just what that piece of mathematics or context is. What we're doing is, by building in that story, we'll come back to this a little bit in a minute, but by doing that, we're creating that big, large neural network that we saw that really incredible visual of in the brain. And so one little connection that comes from that will trigger the rest of it. I guess I still have my lab coat on here, so I look maybe official for this part of it. But what I'm going to do is ask you to write into chat what you notice from the data, what you think the data mean. And the question is, what are the data showing? So now we happen to have the Dan's Street well. This is a little piece of information. I'll give everyone about 15 seconds to write into chat what they think the Dan Street well is showing. If it's hard to see for your visual, I'm going to go ahead and read. So on the y-axis, we have the number of deaths in the home. And on the x-axis, we have the distance from the water well. Interesting to take a look at. What are the data showing? I'm going to move on from there. I'll only give you a minute. We've got the James Street well. Again, same thing on the y-axis, the number of deaths in the home, and on the x-axis, the distance from the water well. What are the data showing? What about the Broad Street well? Continue. The Dean Street well. I know I'm moving through these quickly. You'll have a chance to look at them. The Seville Street well. The Prince Street well. And finally, all of them together. I'd like for you to take just a minute or two, just to yourself, to think about it. You're welcome to write into the chat box. You're welcome to read other people's comments and respond to them. And Kara, if you would you be able to facilitate some of the chat comments that we have?
Yeah, we have some people saying the closer to the well, the more number of incidences or deaths. Someone else pointed out that the Broad Street well shows a negative correlation across the x-axis.
Oh,
ooh, that's
nice
some
language, negative correlation.
Formal.
That's what we would expect from our middle school students the very first time they look at it. No, we would, obviously the language would be different. Anything else? Any other comments?
Someone else is saying they would want to see the relationship between the wells in the city. And it seems someone else says some water is contaminated and some wells are not. Yeah, so I think the information that folks would love to be able to see is the map of the location of the wells.
Oh, that's an interesting thing. A lot of people like to see the map. That's come up before. I tell you what, why don't we do this? Instead of me giving the answer, how about if we just simply talk to Dr. Jon Snow? He is not the same doctor that's from that television show. I forget what that Game of Thrones. This is the Dr. Jon Snow who actually did this work back in the 1800s. Let's see what Dr. Snow has to say.
Do you see any patterns emerging?
Each graph is related to a different water well. Are you attempting to link this outbreak to the water supply? The Seville Downs and James Street wells all have clusters that rise.
Indeed, they do. That is a positive association which shows how the number of deaths rise as one travels farther away from those particular wells.
True. These graphs do all indicate that those living close to these wells are not getting sick.
Correct. And what about the other graphs?
The other graphs seem to have nonlinear associations. I see no discernible pattern.
Except for one.
The Broad Street well. As one moves farther away from the well, the death count falls.
Or conversely,
The closer one moves to the well, the greater number of cholera deaths. You're right, John. It's not in the air. It is in the water. It's in the Broad Street well.
that does seem to be the most contaminated area. And look at this outlier. That's the Seaford residence. There were 6 deaths in that home, and they didn't live near the Broad Street well, but the entire family worked at the textile mill next to it.
Oh, merciful heaven. You found it. Brilliant. What do we do now?
I've got to find a way to convince the authorities to take the handle off the Broad Street well. Then we can trace the water to its very source.
You'll save so many lives, John. Well done.
A ray of hope in this otherwise dreary situation.
A landmark discovery. Who would have thought that when we were children, my brother would grow up to save the world?
Well, that remains to be seen. Wish me luck.
Good luck, Dr. Snow.
All right, so that does come from a true story. It actually has to do with some of our initial mapping that we actually use some of the same mathematics we used to map the coronavirus today. When we're done with these sorts of things and we're done with the simulation, the type of assignment we give to student matters a lot. We do need to do a couple of things where we also quiz them on the same concepts, but in a different context, because we do know that learning to be able to transfer has to be in both contexts, to be able to have that flexibility. And the other part to it that we like to do at MidSchool Math is have our students build what we call a reflection artifact. And that's where they draw a full color picture, they build their own data from it, and then they give it their own title. This one happens to be from my son, and he called it Bad Water. And he's written down there below, he's dyslexic, and he says a negative linear association between the distance of the home and the well. And there's a negative linear association between them and the number of deaths in the home. The farther people live from the well, the fewer deaths occur in the home. One outlier exists. And so it gives us a sense of, a reflection artifact gives us a deep sense of the learning that we've had. But it does one more thing, and that is that the picture of the well actually causes what we call a memory cascade. And that memory cascade not only gets us to recall the story about cholera and the cholera outbreak, but also the mathematics that we've learned within this particular lesson. And that memory cue can occur many, many months down the road. It's beautiful to walk into a classroom and see all this student-made artwork. Student artwork that hangs on the walls is much more powerful than us having commercial posters. And even, quite frankly, it's more powerful than what the teacher is typically going to put up when they've covered the entire walls with their own work. We want to reflect in our classrooms the student work that's been done. Now, a couple of you all are wondering, well, when do I teach? When do I actually give that direct instruction, or do I? And the answer is definitely, absolutely, you certainly do. It's just you're going to do it after. We've learned from the research that if we teach after we've had an experience, that the recall is higher. And if you've ever tried to set up a trampoline, about half of you will read the instructions first, try to set up the trampoline, and then read the instructions again. There's another group of you, the other half of you, that are going to try to set up the trampoline first and then read the instructions. Between the two of you, you're both going to end up in the same end goal at the end of it. You're going to get the trampoline built, and but at this stage, we're trying to learn direct instruction after we've tried to figure something out first. Dr. John Snow, this is his map or a visual of what the map that he really used. And he determined that there was indeed a what we call a negative association from the distance of the, between the number of deaths and the distance of the Broad Street well. And we have that, we say, as one variable increases, the other variable decreases. We can give our students the precise language that we want them to have, but we're going to give it to them after they've gone into depth with the conceptual part to it, after they've done some of their own work first. Now our direct instruction comes in, and now after that we can give them the quiz, but they're going to have an experience to anchor this into. And I'm going to go ahead and just I'll go ahead and share this. In addition to these videos, we also build in a computer simulation that allows for students to be able to fail safely over and over and over again. And so for each one of these that we build in, we have one of those. And at MidSchool Math, we build in one for each one of the standards from 5th to 8th grade. And they're all different types of stories, everything from the time of the Black Plague always to the surface of Mars, whatever the context is that would be coherent. And so we have 146 of these, every standard from 5th to 8th grade, that we build in. And I'm going to go ahead and move on, and then I'll answer a few questions. I actually went out and taught this lesson before class in front of Dr. Joe Bowler, and the kids got into an argument. One of the kids said, what's really going on here is that there's a filter that's in the pipes, and as you get further away from the well, it's the filter that's gone bad. I know it, I'm sure of it. And this other kid said, no, they didn't have pipes back then, they had this. And another kid jumped in and said, actually, you guys, like, they did have pipes back then, but they didn't have them in the water wells, blah, blah. And it became this huge eruption with like all these kids starting to argue about what was going on with the data. They were saying, what are the data showing? And they all had this, basically, a fight. Dan Meyer says, what do you do best in best classes? He goes, start a fight where you get an argumentation. And that's the engagement we want. Now we had to go back through the protocols, and we had to come back and bring everybody back together for the conversation to be able to work. But as we did this and as we worked with those students, their language became more precise, and then we went back and taught them. And this is just prior to the coronavirus and everything that occurred. And finally, just to let you all know, we do build core curriculum at MidSchool Math, and we do have all of that free until August 2020. There's also a lot of tools that we're going to leave open and leave available for those teachers in the future. But you're welcome to go there and sign up for things. I did want to take a minute, though, and see if there are any questions. It is getting to be 8:48, and I want to make sure I don't go into the next session. So what I'd like to do is just spend a minute. And Kara, if there's anything in the chat that we should pay attention to, I'd love to make sure that we take care of that.
Someone asked, have you used mapping diagrams as an alternative to graphs?
Oh, that's an interesting thing. And the answer is that I think each and every one of these, each and every one of the visual approaches, we know from Dr. Bowler's work that the visuals are the part that light up that mathematical part of the brain. And so each and every one of those tools that we have are really important, and we want to be able to see it in all different formats.
Okay, and someone wants to know sort of specifically about sharing these simulations with their students in the virtual classrooms. Like, how will that work, if you could describe it?
Yeah, you bet. So we at least within our system, we build an LMS that goes with it. It takes a couple seconds to assign it. And so you can assign it to students. I will say, if you're using Zoom or you're using Classroom, in the synchronous format where you have an opportunity for students to be able to watch a video, go into a breakout, and then come back and say, oh, here's what we learned from that, or here's what we think we need to know. It does work relatively well. I've seen that happen, but you have to become fluid with all these new online tools. I'll be honest, our team has been working. We've been learning from Kara. How do you do a breakout room in Zoom? We've got to make sure that we've got the right settings there so that we're not breaking any of the settings laws. So we're trying to work with all those things. But they do work, and I actually teach my niece and my nephew at the current time, and I assign them the simulations, and they go and they do them, and then I check my system for it. And all of that's part of what you can look for in that free curriculum. There's a tutorial video that's there that helps. And I will tell you that I do miss those conversations live in a classroom. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts?
There's how much time should be given to students to do the work prior to us explaining the lesson? Like, what's the balance in like a 45-minute class period? How much time are you spending in each of the different sections?
Yeah, sure. So we build it out where we have 60-minute classrooms. We usually use the first day where we're just immersed into the video and immersed into the story. And after that, we do the direct instruction piece. And that usually is 40 minutes of sort of going into the video immersions, and then about 20 minutes of direct instruction. And then the day following is when we do the computer-based simulations. And that's where the students need to be able to fail and fail safely. It's based off of the principle from the first flight simulators back in the 1920s, where they found that pilots were broken into two groups, and one got expert teaching or teaching under an expert pilot up in the air, and other pilots that were just trained on the flight simulator. And they compared those two groups on their final exam, which was up in the air. And they found that the pilots that were in the simulators made 1,500 fewer mistakes than those that were up in the air. And the reason is pretty simple, is that if you can guess about it, you can guess that those expert pilots didn't let their students fail safely. They never learned that they go too far, bank too far, or whatever it might be. They made sure that they pulled back a little bit early. And that failure is part of the learning process.
I think for me in my 5th grade class, I find that the allowing kids to kind of make an emotional connection to the story is just really key to then having them connect to the math and being engaged and being motivated to really use the math to solve a problem. So that's what I find really exciting about this work.
Great, and we'll make sure that at the end of this, we're going to provide a link for everybody to make sure you can come back and access the tools that you need to. So.
Yeah, all of the slides from all of the different presentations, we're going to send out sort of an Eventbrite to everybody who's registered, either tonight or maybe tomorrow morning, with like copies of all of the slides and also information from